Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this Kettenkrad by Rubicon Models. This is a 28mm or 1/56 scale plastic gaming model, and as the box art suggests, and I guess the text promises, the kit includes a Goliath tracked mine, which I will admit is a large part of why I bought this, though the Kettenkrad by itself would be a bunch of fun anyway. There's also a pair of trailers so that we can make a little train, as the illustration on the back of the box shows. It also has a suggestion for some paint colours, shows us the decals that are included, and gives us some paragraphs about the Kettenkrad's history and use, and some info about the Goliath too. Pretty much what you would expect to see on the back of a Rubicon box really. Inside the box we find 3 bags each containing 1 sprue. I'm not a big fan of these individually bagged sprues, but I suppose it does prevent losing parts if they come off the sprue somehow. This main sprue is probably the one most of you are interested in. There really don't seem to be many parts to this, especially when you consider that there are 3 models to be built out of it. This is pretty normal for a gaming model though, especially smaller ones like this. As I have come to expect from Rubicon's kits, the parts here are quite neatly moulded and the mould lines are barely visible. They are there, and you will need to do some cleanup, which is to be expected of any kit, but it shouldn't be too much effort. The details are quite good. I mean, you aren't getting a super detailed display piece, and if you are after that kind of thing, you probably aren't going to be buying wargaming kits in the first place. That said, this is still pretty well detailed. And I am sure, well, since I've already actually built it, I know, that it builds up into a very nice model, and I'm sure it's going to look delightful when I get around to painting it. There are 2 sprues for the 3 included figures. There's also a cover for the trailer and a bit of stowage on the driver's sprue. These figures are going to take a little bit more effort to clean up than the vehicle parts, which is often the case, and they do look pretty decent anyway. Rubicon's figures have definitely improved in the time since they first started including them, though to be fair, Rubicon's everything has been improving quite a lot. The heads for the figures come separate from their helmets to give you the choice between helmets and soft hats, and I do like that, even if it does make it a little bit more fiddly. I suspect the reason they've done this is to give better detail to the faces. Here's the decal sheet. There's a bunch of license plates and other markings here. The ones for the Kettenkrad are marked as such, as are those for the R75 motorcycle. Without checking, I'm pretty sure this is the exact same decal sheet that came with that motorcycle kit. Rubicon's decals are pretty good, and I'm confident that these will be no exception. Instructions are, unsurprisingly, included. These are the usual good quality, well laid out instructions I expect from Rubicon. There's not a whole lot to do here, and this should be a pretty simple build, so let's get to it. Starting on the Kettenkrad seemed like the most sensible choice here. I begin by joining the sides to the centre part of the Kettenkrad. These parts are keyed and pretty simple to put together. Obviously there's a part for either side. Hopefully that isn't a shocking revelation. A little bit of pressure and the parts end up nicely bonded. I set that aside and then work on the front wheel. I guess these are called the forks. That's what I've heard them called anyway. These come as one part with a board that slots into the top of the wheel. I'm sure I joked about this board preventing the wheel from moving on stream, and it was very hilarious. Next, the upper part of the front wheel assembly goes into place like so. At first it wasn't super obvious, at least to me, how this should go, but it might just be because I'm a little bit slow, eh? Eventually it clicked though. The headlamp is then glued onto the appropriate mounting point, which has some keying to make sure that you don't put it on all wibbly wobbly, though there is a tiny bit of play there so it can be a little bit wibbly wobbly. That's probably fine. Then comes the handlebars. I found it slightly fiddly to get these nice and straight, and I'm not sure that I got them perfect anyway, but they're close enough. And that's the front of the vehicle complete. Nothing too tricky here. Returning to the hull, I glue this, I guess you might call it the front plate, into place, which is simple enough. It could have been done earlier too, I suppose. Then I made a bit of a mistake. I glued the top part of the Kettenkrad's body on. This was pretty simple, and the parts are shaped such that they should take a little bit of effort to put them together wrong. which you wouldn't do, would you? A little pressure and the thing is together. There is a bit of a gap at the front left, but it's not too bad and should be easy enough to fill in later. Why was this a mistake? I'll tell you later, though you might be able to figure it out yourself anyway. In the meantime, I added the backrest for the passenger seat. This is easy enough, and it should make the ride more comfortable for passengers. Then comes this rear thing. As always, a bit of nudging and it's in place. It looks quite nice if you ask me. I don't know if you did, but I'm telling you anyway. Then, why not add the tracks? If we don't, there won't be much mobility, and where's the fun in that? We need to add some road wheels to these, which as you can see is not an overly complicated task. Just make sure that they're not on at some weird angle. I added a bit of extra glue where the wheels contact the tracks, just for a bit more strength. I'm not sure how effective that is, but it can't hurt. Then I set the tracks aside and assembled the cargo trailer. I guess you might call it that anyway. According to the box, this is called an infantry cart IF8, though I don't suspect you actually put infantry in it, though you could. It looks like it's more for hauling the infantry's equipment. This is a simple matter of gluing the towing bar thing to the bottom of it. This should go with the arch in the bar part pointing upwards. Also, the towing pin should face upwards as well. Then I add the wheels. These were a little fiddly to install, but not too bad. Just a little fiddly. You can see that the wheel hub part is a little bit offset from the axle part that connects to the bottom of the tub. Make sure the wheels are lined up with each other, and that's about all you need to do with this trailer. Nice, quick, and easy. There is a covered load that can be installed on this, but I didn't see that until later, so I guess I'll show it later. There's no way I could edit the video to show it now. Anyway, back to the Kettenkrad, onto which I'm installing the tracks. There are guide pins that go into the holes in the sides of the hull, and this makes installation super easy. I leave that to Bond and I work on the Goliath tracked mine. This little guy is shockingly, by which I mean not at all shockingly, very easy to put together. I glue the two halves of the hull together. There isn't really any obvious keying, but you can tell when you've got this together right. I apply pressure to minimize the gaps of course, and then I glue the tracks onto the sides. There are raised rectangular parts for these to mount onto. You can see that there's a little bit of keying on the right side, or I think that's the right side anyway. The drive sprockets should go towards what I think is the front, the end with the protrusion. There's obviously not much to assembling this little thing, but it does look awesome, and kind of adorable. I did almost forget to attach this bumper, but I didn't forget. Not that much anyway. What matters is that it's installed, and doing so was quite easy. That's the Goliath tracked mine completed. It is going to need to be transported, so why not build the trailer? This is also, unsurprisingly, quite easy. First, I add these side bits, whatever you want to call them. They look to have some sort of leaf springy bits, and pins that will link into the sides of the Goliath. There's nothing especially tricky about getting these into place. Because I want to be able to take the Goliath off the trailer, I didn't glue it into place on the trailer like the instructions seem to want. To allow it to be mounted and removed easily, I trimmed down the pins just a tiny bit, though I didn't film that. You should be able to figure out how to do that without seeing me do it anyway. Then I attach the wheels. These fit just tightly enough that there is no play, but not so tight that there was a risk of damaging the trailer. If you were to ask me, I would say that it looks really good. I certainly think leaving the Goliath off until painting is a good idea, even if you don't want to make it removable. Now that all the trailers and Kettenkrad are built, it's time to be a mature adult, and not a small child. Heh choo-choo. Before I go any further, why not show the cover for the infantry cart? This is of course pretty simple, and I think I will glue this into place later, but it might be easier and provide a better result if it was painted separately. Either way, this gives me plenty of time to decide if I actually want to use this part or make my own load for the cart. Okay, so here's why it was a bad idea for me to put the top part of the Kettenkrad hull on when I did. It makes it impossible to install the steering wheel part. This is easy enough to fix though. I simply clip off the outer part of the keying thing here. Is there a better name for that? I've no idea. After that, the part can be slotted into the front of the hull like so. It's not going to stay there with friction alone, but once you glue it into place that won't matter. Then I figured why not assemble the driver. Obviously I start by test fitting, and I felt like the figure wasn't quite fitting all the way in place, and it was a little bit more fiddly to get him in there than I would have liked. So, because I'm a monster, I chopped his feet off above the ankle. Now he can't walk anywhere. Sucks to be him, I guess. The figure does now fit much better, and it's going to slot into place way easier, which will be handy when I've painted everything and want to install the driver. I'm going to leave him loose for now just to make that painting easier. Then I attach the arms. These are really helpful if you want to do things like steer a Kettenkrad. They were kind of fiddly to get into place and have them looking as though they're holding the handlebars, which I'm sure is no surprise to anybody, but I did get it done eventually. As you can see, I'm using the handlebars themselves as a guide to make sure that it's going to look right. The left arm was a little bit less tricky, but it still hasn't gone together perfectly. It's not too bad at all, I'm just going to have to fix a couple of gaps, but that's not really a big issue. Next, it's time to build the head. Well, it's more just making a choice between the helmet or the hat and then gluing that on, which isn't too hard. You just need to do a little bit of nudging to get the headwear to sit nicely. And as you can see, I've chosen the hat because of reasons. Mostly because chat agreed that it was a more interesting option. That head can then be installed in the obvious location, which is on top of the driver figure, in case it wasn't that obvious. And that is where I stopped. There are of course 2 more figures, but I wasn't entirely sure I was going to use them, and I'm sure you can figure out what assembling these might look like. Anyway, the 28mm scale plastic Kettenkrad with trailers and Goliath tracked mine is now complete. I'm really happy with how this model has turned out, though I'm not at all surprised by that. Rubicon make great models, and they're doing nothing but getting better. I do actually have a metal Kettenkrad from Warlord somewhere, and I did try to find it to do a comparison, but as you might have figured out by lack of said comparison, I was not able to find it. If you are interested though, I did make a video about it way back in 2015. Holy shit, that was ages ago. As you might expect, the metal model is kind of chunky and nowhere near as neat as this plastic kit. It also doesn't come with any trailers or cute little tracked mines, and we're not here to talk about that anyway. As I said, I really like this kit. Even the Kettenkrad by itself would have been cool, but the trailers and Goliath make it so much better. Of course, you don't have to use them, but I don't think anybody is going to be upset about having the choice to use them. Speaking of choices, unlike a lot of other Rubicon kits, there's not really a lot of choice of parts here, and there's very little left over for the bits box, but that's not really a bad thing. I do like that the cover for the little cart is optional. You can obviously choose to use it or not, but I'm sure there are also plenty of people who might enjoy building their own load for it. There's also that canvas roll or whatever it is, that you can place across the engine section of the Kettenkrad. Obviously I've not done that, but I still might. And that is about it by way of optional parts. Of course, there's nothing to stop you from making your own rolls and tarps and bits and pieces, but this video is obviously about what comes in the kit. The details look pretty good to me. I'm clearly no Kettenkrad surgeon, so I can't tell you if it's super accurate or not, though it is a gaming piece, so omissions and simplification of detail are to be expected, and I don't consider that a bad thing. I'm sure they could have made the kit using tons of tiny little bits and pieces and fiddly assembly steps, which could result in more detail, but it's designed to be quick and simple to build, which it was. It looks like they've also taken strength into consideration. The model does need to stand up to being used on the gaming table, and I'm pretty confident that it will. I think this is going to be a fine addition to my German bolt-action forces, even if they only use it for fun rides. I've got no idea how useful it is in the game itself, but that's okay. I don't normally buy models for my forces with any thought to their use anyway. I just like having cool stuff, and this thing certainly is cool. I built this model live on stream, and it was a good time. A rather enjoyable build indeed. If you would like to watch me build stuff like this live on stream, go to twitch.tv/Herbert_Erpaderp, or click on the link in the description and give me a follow. I've got some more awesome Rubicon stuff coming soon, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. So drop by and say hi. So what do you think of this model? Have you built it before? Do you use a Kettenkrad or tracked mines in your games of bolt action? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And of course, if you haven't already, why not subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a patron or YouTube member, or if you are feeling helpful, share this video with your friends or anybody you think might get something out of it. Links to all of my things are in the description below. And as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.